Let's bring in Rodger Baker. He's Stratfor Senior Vice President of Strategic Analysis at RANE, a geopolitical intelligence platform. So, Rodger, first I'd like to get your take on the recent DPRK missile launch. What is your take on that, and what does this show?
Well, I think it shows three things. Number one is that obviously the North Koreans continue to focus on their deterrent capabilities. Number two is that this was a cruise missile, not a ballistic missile, so it was technically within the right of North Korea to test this. But the third is to look at this in the context of the types of missiles and rockets the North Koreans have been testing, mostly looking at things like cruise missiles and MROS systems. And those are really battlefield weapons for use within the Korean context, as opposed to the types of weapons that would be used, for example, for long-range attacks against the United States, Japan, or U.S. assets in Hawaii. So this is really about the North Koreans looking at the peninsula and shaping their weapon systems for a proper defense there.
Well, I want to ask you about this recent meeting in Japan. Nuclear talks, as we know, have been stalled since 2019. So what would you consider some of the takeaways from this Tokyo meeting?
Well, the South Koreans seem to continue to push the idea that there needs to be some sort of giving to the North Koreans, either opening through humanitarian aid or some form of dialogue or interaction. And the United States seems to start to be willing to go along with that. The U.S. envoy said there were no preconditions, and he said that the U.S. was willing to engage in humanitarian aid to North Korea even without progress on denuclearization. So it sounds like, at least in the public statements, the United States is starting to lean a little bit toward the South Korean position that any form of talk is a better start than where we're at right now.
Well, it seemed like in recent months there was some progress in relations on the Korean Peninsula, some communications reestablished between the North and the South. How would you describe it right now?
I think the North is playing a slightly cautious game. They don't want to instigate a major shift in U.S.-Korean relations that puts everything back to 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. At the same time, the North still appears very concerned about having any interaction with anybody physically, because they're dealing with trying to keep COVID out of North Korea. And so having actual physical talks is going to be very difficult for the North Korean leadership anytime soon.
And quickly, I got to ask you about China. They were not represented at this Tokyo meeting, but we know that State Council Foreign Minister Wang Yi is making some rounds around Asia. South Korea is next on his list. So what do you think we'll see there when it comes to discussing the DPRK?
I think that the Chinese are going to offer their good graces, in some sense, with the South Koreans as a way to try to keep South Korea from sliding too far over onto the U.S. side in competition.
All right, Rodger Baker, always great to see you. Thank you so much for your take on that.